Thank you so much for agreeing to this. I'm really excited about this article. It's honestly, it's one of those that personally it's really important to me. My younger brother has Down syndrome and diabetes, and so it's one of those that like whenever they assigned it, I was really excited. But I also realized like I'm not the person who can speak to this
Right.
entirely. I guess to start, can you tell me a little bit about Includis Publishing and how it got started?
Sure. Technically, I wasn't with the company when they started, but I know I met Lou in 2017. I had read about Includis in some article online, and I reached out to her and I was like, I'd love to help with this. This is something I want to do too. So she had me on as an intern for a while. And then I got promoted to my position now. I've been with her for 4 years now. And primarily, we want to bring disability diversity to all kinds of readers. And that's not necessarily like a disabled character per se, but if there's a disabled author who wants to write a book and send it to us, we are also willing to take that on. And we want to engage with disability inclusion as much as possible. To my knowledge, there's no other publishers that do this at this point. I know of some imprints and publishers who will publish books that have disability diversity, but none of them specifically have their mission to bring disability diversity to readers everywhere. So that's something that's pretty unique about us.
How long has Includis been doing this? Do you know when it was founded? And
I believe she had only been toying with it for a year before I joined, 2016-ish era. But even when I joined, it wasn't as fully realized as it is now.
gotcha. And then you said that you read about Includis and got your interest there. What was it specifically that sparked your interest in the company?
Just the fact it was actually through, I think, one of the NDA magazines. They were highlighting people with disabilities who had like jobs, which sounds absurd, and it is. But Luda was in there for the fact that she had started this company. So just the fact that she was a disabled woman who was running it was really inspiring to me. Okay, that was a bad choice of terms, but not inspiring. It was inspiring because I was finishing up college at that point, and I wasn't sure where I was going with, and I was interested in publishing. I had done an internship with the publisher that year and the year prior. I liked it. That spoke to me, and the fact that I barely see any disability diversity in books. I spent now a little bit more, but definitely not a lot. So the fact that it was a publishing company that was specifically working to include disability in books, that was what mostly spoke to me.
Definitely. And then going off of that, I was going to ask just why, for you personally, but also in general, disability representation in books is so important.
It's important to see yourself, especially for kids. Like personally, I'm really drawn to the young adult and middle grade space. Probably because when I read that, I didn't see like anyone like me in those books, and not that it didn't feel valid, but it just didn't make me feel like a valued member of society, even though I am, and even though everyone with a disability is. But it's nice to read books about other people because you're escaping in a way. But like, when does someone with a disability get to be like the hero who saves the day? Never. So that's why I think it's important, and it's important that kids and adults, because I see definitely more diverse children's books, but I rarely see it in adult books, which is a problem. But obviously, adults are more self-aware and they're more grounded than kids and teens. But it's still important that they're represented in books so that people can see themselves for who they are. Because I feel if I had read books that had people with disabilities in them, I might have not rejected like parts of myself. Because when you're a kid, you want to be cool, you want to be doing what everyone else is doing. And I wanted to do that too. But I felt in order to do that, I had to have like two identities, like my identity not as a disabled person and my identity as a disabled person. and that couldn't like connect, which obviously isn't possible. But I didn't think that I was like other disabled people. I surrounded myself with people who weren't disabled. And I wish I knew more about the disability community before, because I would have been more involved when I was younger, but I didn't. But I feel if I had seen more disabled people in the books I was reading, I would have been more apt to A, find that community, and B, like accept myself for who I am as a disabled person who is able to do anything a non-disabled person can do, but without separating those two identities.
Definitely. You talked about, obviously, in your role as editor, you're going to see a lot of different representations and different genres that are including disabled characters and disabled representation in books. Are there any common issues, or maybe not necessarily in the books you're reading for Includus, but just in normal pop culture and entertainment media? Are there any common issues with the books that do try and represent disability?
Yeah, of course. So I am also a sensitivity reader for a different company. So I do this like on the regular. I'll read manuscripts that have a character who is in a wheelchair or physically disabled in some way, and I will find the parts that aren't so good and tell them how to fix it. But I think the biggest problem is just like wording sometimes. Like a lot of non-disabled people like to use the term differently abled. And disabled people hate that because we're not differently abled. People just see us that way. So I feel like wording is definitely the biggest thing. And like even today, I was working on a project for my sensitivity reading job, and someone said a wheelchair bound. And I'm like, no, that's not good because, first of all, no one is in a wheelchair 24/7. We do get into our wheelchairs. And second of all, I'm not bound. Bound has a negative connotation, and I'm able to use my wheelchair to have more mobility and to have more freedom than I would otherwise. So I don't consider myself bound. So something better would be wheelchair user or something like that. So definitely how you phrase things is really important. And a lot of disability tropes are like the inspiration porn, where you just see us as inspirational for getting out of bed, which isn't that inspirational. Stuff like that. And also, a lot of disabled characters tend to be villainized in media. Was working on another project for Includus, actually, and some of the characters who had disabilities were villainized, and I was like, that's just not okay. And obviously, if you're an author, whether you're disabled or not, you're gonna end up writing something that might have issue, and that's the way it is. We're not perfect. Like, I'm sure I've written things that other people would find that are ableist, but you have to grow and learn from your community. So there's a lot, basically. But I feel like those are the big key points of problematic things in media.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about why inspiration porn is harmful and why it can be problematic. Just to drive home the point, why are some of those other tropes that you listed, the villainization and that kind of thing, why are those especially harmful?
They're ableist, first of all, and they paint disabled people in a certain way, and then that influences how people see disabled people. The villain thing might be stretching it a little bit, but that it depends on the disability too. Like I don't think someone would see someone in a wheelchair as a villain, but more skewing towards the mental and cognitive disability side. And then obviously that's harmful for them because if they, when they need help with whatever their disability entails, they might not be able to get it because people view them negatively because of the stereotypes that they've seen in media, and that influences like down the line.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess then what advice do you have for writers who want to include disabled characters in their book, but maybe don't have any prior knowledge of the disability community going into it?
Mm-hmm. Definitely do your research, 100%. That's the most important. Find people and talk to them. If you don't have someone like in your immediate family or friend circle that you know, and hire a sensitivity reader when you're done writing your first script or first draft. It's so important for anything, even like if you want to write a gay character and you're not gay, but it's just a side character, you should still have a sensitivity reader for that. So those are probably the two big things. And then also ask yourself if you're the right person to tell that story, that specific character. Obviously, less so if the character is a side character or something. But if you have a main character, if you want to tell a story about a main character who has a disability and you don't have that experience, should you really be telling that story? You have to ask yourself, like, why is it so important that you use a disabled character for that specific role?
Mm-hmm. Are there specific like resources or websites that you would suggest they look at? Are there any like databases or things where people can find that sort of information that, you know, they need in that research?
I say check out We Need Diverse Books. That's a good resource. I have another friend who does a YouTube channel specifically for writers who want to include disabilities in their work. It's Vanessa Marie, and she's like a booktuber and an author tuber. And she's actually also working on her own publishing company too.
Oh, wow.
And she provides like tips for authors, like I said, who love to write about disabilities and even general stuff for authors. But you know, she's disabled, so she has that lived experience and she can talk about it. She has a couple of playlists on like writing diverse characters and things like that. And those are both two helpful resources that I can think of off the top of my head. There's tons out there, but definitely those two are ones that I go to most.
Perfect. Are there any specific like genres that you see having more of an issue with disability representation than others, just out of curiosity?
By more of an issue, do you mean not having it, or do you mean having it and including it in a not representative way?
Either one, honestly.
Like I said before, a lot of adult fiction, historical fiction, most of your adult fiction does not have disabled characters or talk about disability. And if they do, it's not great. I don't really have a specific genre for, I think, ones that do it in a harmful way, but I will say, from what I've read, it tends to skew towards middle grade, but it depends on the author, obviously. But definitely, it's most lacking in adult fiction.
Gotcha. So then, what do you think, you know, if aside from hiring a sensitivity reader and all those great suggestions that you made earlier, is there anything that you can think of that authors should do while they're writing to avoid falling into some of those harmful tropes and stereotypes about disabled characters?
I think taking a step back is important too. So let's say you're writing a chapter about a disabled side character. So you write it, and then I think I would suggest stepping away from it for a bit, a couple weeks, and coming back to it with fresh eyes and really thinking again about if you should be telling the story and if you think you should, why is it so important that you tell it? And I think also having beta readers as well, which isn't really something you can do while you're writing, obviously, but I feel like beta readers would also help get rid of some of those problems. I feel like most of the work has to be done before writing and after writing, because obviously you can't like put a sensitivity reader in an author's head while they're writing. So it's really going to be on them to write it correctly at that stage.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was thinking about, and obviously this was years ago. I've not read the books in a while. I'll preface with that, but I remember some of the first books I read with disabled characters. I saw a lot of issues. Looking back, I'm thinking about how little personality they had.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you see that issue frequently as well, in terms of just their like main personality trait being that they're disabled and not really having much else to the character.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a big one. I feel like that, like you said, it's been a while. I feel like that was something even like years ago, that was like the original problem. But now that people are more, or non-disabled people are more aware of disabled people, it tends to skew towards more inspiration point things. And, you know, that falls under not having a personality too. Because if you just exist as someone's inspiration, like you don't really have a personality except that you're disabled and that you get out of bed in the morning. So that's not really a personality either. But that hasn't been something that I've seen like in my work from other people. So cross my fingers. Hopefully that doesn't happen. It's more like they have a personality, but the way that other people view them is problematic, or they have 75% of a personality, or their personality revolves around them in relation to other people, and not like as their own person with hopes and dreams and goals.
So I guess you've touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to ask, do you think non-disabled writers should write disabled characters?
I think it depends on how much of space that character takes up. I understand an author wanting to write a side character with a disability that isn't in any way a main character. I feel like I'm okay with that. But I'm torn, you know? Because obviously it's going to be easier for a non-disabled author to write a disabled character and then get that book out in the world than it is for a disabled author to write that disabled character and get it out in the world, which is a problem. So I'm, like I said before, about questioning if that character really needs to be in there and really needs to be disabled and why. I feel like that's so important when answering that question, especially obviously for non-disabled people. But I feel like if they don't have to do it, they shouldn't do it, and they should leave it to the disabled person to write that story, because there's no way it can be 100% authentic if they have no lived experience. And specifically for like main characters I'm talking about. So I can't really say yes or no, because it's like the publishing industry they're gatekeepers, and they don't want disabled authors to be writing things like this. They say they do, and then when the book gets pitched, they'll say, "Oh, you know, we have a book like that for this year, and we reached our quota," which is ridiculous. But so I kind of go back and forth on that question. I'm sorry, I don't have an absolute answer for you.
I wanted to make sure to ask before I finished if you had any other thoughts or advice or anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't touch on in my questions.
I just want to say that people should, publishers especially, should be more open to acquiring books about disability by people who are disabled. And it should be part of their like everyday sort of book life, I guess. It shouldn't be one season and done.
Right.
Because disabled people make up 25% of the population. That's a big percentage. But yet, I think it's like under 2% of characters in media or in TV shows are like disabled, and probably half of those aren't represented accurately. I just feel like it's time for publishers to like open their doors and be a little bit and be more inclusive.
Wonderful. Thank you again so much.
Yeah, totally.
Wonderful. Thank you again so much. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.